everyone, and welcome to another video.
Think I know you better to forget her. Certain people made for running. Think I need you more than let you know I'm bored and tell me this means more than nothing.
So today we are going to be getting back in the swing of things of doing wrap-ups. I haven't done a wrap-up since like June of last year, and I didn't like doing them, but I wanted to get back into doing them because I think it would be nice for like when future me wants to look back on a book that I read and be like, what did I think about that? I don't know, because I didn't do a wrap-up about it. So I decided we were doing wrap-ups again. So to help myself prepare for this video, throughout the month I've been taking notes as I read the books that I read this month. Most of them I have brief notes on, just like how I felt while reading it. Hopefully that will make my life a little bit easier when it comes to filming these kinds of videos. The other thing I want to incorporate into these videos is my bullet journal. I've been talking a lot about my bullet journal lately. I did a video about it on Sunday. So if you haven't seen that video, you guys should go check it out. But first of all, I have a January wrap-up page, and then I got that idea from Stephanie Bookish, so thank you, Stephanie. But the other thing I wanted to bring up, and that I will hopefully talk about in all of these monthly wrap-up videos, is my statistics from the month. I've already got them filled out here, but I will read them to you. So in January, I read 10 books, 3,391 pages, 3 physical books, 7 audiobooks, and 0 rereads. So hopefully every month I will bring this back up and we can see my statistics as the year goes, and then I have a total at the end of the year as well. So I think that's like a little like fun thing to do to kind of like motivate myself to do these videos, because I don't really like doing wrap-ups. We are going to do it anyway. So getting into the books. The first book I read in January was Burn Our Bodies Down by Rory Power. This is the author of Wilder Girls, which I read in 2019, I believe. And I didn't like Wilder Girls that much. I liked the concept, but like the execution of the story didn't really work for me. I was kind of mostly just confused and bored the whole time. But this book I enjoyed a lot more. It definitely has that creepy vibe that Rory Power likes to write, and I really enjoyed that aspect of it. It's like not inherently scary. There's nothing really like scary, like horror movie scary happening, but it just has this like overall like vibe that's like uneasy and like you're uncomfortable kind of while reading it, and you just know that like something weird is going on. So it's similar to Wilder Girls in that way. It has the similar vibe, but the stories are very different. The atmosphere of the book honestly reminds me of movies like A Simple Favor, Annihilation, and honestly Hereditary a bit. I don't know if you guys have seen any of those movies. Annihilation is one of my favorites, and A Simple Favor is really good too, but Hereditary, don't get me wrong, it's a good movie and it's done really well. It scared the crap out of me when I watched it. It's been like 7 or 8 months since I watched that movie, and to this day I have like recurring thoughts about that movie because it was really, really scary. But if you've seen any of those movies, it has a similar vibe. Like I said, it's not inherently like scary. Like there's nothing scary happening, but it has a vibe that's like you don't know what to expect. It's really creepy, and I love that. I love that vibe. It worked really well for me. But overall, I did really enjoy the atmosphere of the book. The story follows this girl named Margot who has only ever known her mom. She hasn't really known the rest of her family, especially not her father. One day, she finds out her grandmother's phone number and calls her grandma and talks to her, and her mom did not want her to do this at all. She ends up going to the town that her grandma lives in and meeting her grandma along with some other people from the neighborhood. As soon as she gets there, things are weird, but you don't know why they're weird, or like you don't know where things are heading. Like you just don't know. I don't really want to give too much away about the plot because it's sort of one of those books you just need to read, because I don't want to like spoil anything. But there's definitely some really crazy like family backstory in this book, and it was really well done. It was really good. I just really enjoyed it. I don't know how many times I could say that, but I gave this book 4 stars because I just really enjoyed the way it was written and the creepiness element. Next, I read Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe by Benjamin Hilary Sands. This has been on my TBR for a long time. Like I think ever since I discovered BookTube, like back in like 2018, this has been on my TBR. I don't know why it took me this long to read, but I just eventually was like, I'm gonna read this book. So I thought this was a really cute contemporary. I loved the representation that it had of the characters' heritage and also their sexuality. I also really enjoyed the writing style. It was really easy to get into, and it was just a really fun and sweet story. But if you don't know, this story is about two characters named Aristotle and Dante. They both have some interesting life situations, but one day they meet each other and they just become friends instantly. And they learn more about themselves and about each other as they spend time being friends. But honestly, this book is just really a slice of life. It's really just mostly about their friendship and their relationship that they have. So it's definitely a good read, and I gave this one 4 stars as well. Next, I read A Good Girl's Guide to Murder by Holly Jackson. So this I read on audiobook, and I actually really enjoyed the audiobook as well because the narration itself was read by one narrator, but there were certain parts when the character was interviewing people when it would have tape recording sounds, and it would have a full cast of characters in those certain segments, and I thought that was kind of cool. It kind of felt like I was watching a sort of murder mystery documentary. So this story follows a girl named Pippa who's doing an assignment for school. She decides that she wants to dive into the case of a girl from her hometown who was murdered 5 years ago, and the murder was pinned on her boyfriend Sal. But as Pippa is sort of unraveling this web of things that happened, she finds out that Andy, the girl who was murdered, wasn't the person that everybody thought she was, and she had a lot of secrets, and that saying Sal is the murderer doesn't really quite add up. This was a really good murder mystery. I've been really into murder mysteries lately. I don't know why, but they've just been catching my attention, so I really enjoyed this one, and I think that there were a lot of really good plot twists, and also the characters were really good and really well developed. And like I said, the audiobook is really cool, so if you have a chance to check out the audiobook, I highly recommend it, and I gave this one 4 stars as well. Okay, then I read Everything I Never Told You by Celeste Ng. I honestly don't remember much from this story. I read this one on audiobook too, and I don't know why, but it didn't click with me. I didn't really know what was going on most of the time. I honestly think it was the POV shifts because there were a lot of point of views in this story. So this story is about a Chinese American family in the 1970s, and they have a daughter named Lydia who is their pride and joy. She's their youngest daughter, and they have lots of dreams for her. But then one day her body ends up found in a lake and she's dead. And so the story kind of follows the falling apart of the family and how they deal with the loss of their daughter. And while I liked the initial mystery aspect of how the daughter died, and that kind of did carry on throughout the book as well, I just didn't really care for the rest of the story, which was unfortunate. But like I said, I think it was the point of views that threw me off. There were several point of views, and I was just having a hard time understanding whose point of view was who. It might just be because I was reading on audio and I couldn't just flip back to the beginning of the chapter and see who I'm reading from, because I just kept forgetting who was talking and what was going on and what timeline we were on. And I don't know, it just didn't really mesh well with me, so I gave this one 3 stars. Then I read Lakewood by Megan Giddings. This story follows a black woman named Lena who is struggling with her financial stuff and taking care of her mother's health. So in order to get some more income, she applies for this medical study. It's very mysterious, and she doesn't really know what's going on or what she's doing there, and she had signed an NDA. There's a lot of mystery involving it. And even at some point, I think she's not allowed to tell her family or her friends what she's doing exactly. So there's lots of mystery elements to this book. And this is another one of those books that has a weird, dark, creepy sort of vibe to it. Like I said, it's not inherently scary, but it just has that sort of vibe, and I've been really digging that lately, so I was really excited when I started reading this and I realized it had that vibe. I honestly picked this book up because Stephanie from Stephanie Bookish talked about it in a recent video that she did. I don't think she's read it yet, but she talked about it because she wanted to read it, and she mentioned that it had a lot of body horror, and I was like, sign me up. So I picked it up right away after she said that. And unfortunately though, I was kind of disappointed because it wasn't exactly what I thought it was going to be. There wasn't that much body horror happening. There were only a couple of scenes that actually had something quote unquote gruesome-ish. And so I wish there was a lot more, and just a lot more weird crazy stuff happening in the story, because that's what I was hoping it would be. Also, sorry Stephanie if you were looking forward to it having a lot of body horror. But overall, it still was a good story. I really liked, there was a point in the story where the main character had a conversation about generalization of races, and I thought that was a really important thing to be talking about. And they also brought up the rudeness of the R word, which I know and I've talked about like with other people, but I've never read in a book, and so I think that that was also a really important aspect that the book covered as well. So overall, I liked the topics that the book brought up and the vibe of it, but it kind of was lacking in other elements that I was hoping for, so I gave it 3 stars. Okay, next I read We Were Liars by E. Lockhart. I was so excited for this book because I have heard all over TikTok and just in general that this book is so sad, and I love a good contemporary that makes me cry. You guys know that. And so I was really pumped to read this book. I'm like, I want to cry all the tears. I want it to happen. And I actually read this book in one day because the audiobook was like 6 hours long, so it didn't take me that long at all. But unfortunately, it didn't make me cry. And honestly, the thing that's supposed to make you cry wasn't that surprising to me at all. I'm not going to tell you really anything else about that specific scene because it's supposed to be a surprise, and I know that some people really found that emotionally impactful, so I don't want to spoil it for anybody who hasn't read this book. But I just didn't, it didn't make me sad, it didn't make me cry, and I was really bummed about that. Basically, the whole premise of the story is the main character was in this sort of accident, and so she can't really remember what happened that night or even certain things that happened that summer. Also, her family owns this like summer house thing that like her whole family meets up at every summer. The people that she hangs out with over the summer are like, they only hang out during the summer. One summer, something happens to her, she's in an accident, and she can't remember what happened. And then, so the next summer she comes back and she's trying to remember things and things are just weird and she can't really figure out what's going on exactly. But anyway, more minute details. So the character Gat, which is sort of the love interest, he's a friend of the family. He kept calling her lucky because she was able to go to Europe. And I don't know, that like really irritated me because like the girl was in an accident. She was out of school for like months. She wasn't able to like do anything. And she can't remember things. Like, yeah, she went to Europe, but like she was in a major like life-changing accident. You need to like chill. So like that really irritated me. Oh, her name's Katie. I just remembered her name. But anyway, so Gat also was just really rude to Katie, like the whole story, like very bipolar. Like he would tell her one thing and then do another thing, and like he didn't like really take into account her feelings ever, and so he was just really annoying to me as a character. But like I said, it wasn't as sad as I was hoping it would be, but it was still a quick read, and I do enjoy contemporary even if it wasn't what I was hoping it was. So I gave this one 3 stars. And now we get into Vicious by V.E. Schwab. So this was my first 5-star read of the year. So I have a very extensive list of thoughts on this book because as I was reading it, I was actually reading it on ebook on my phone, and I was able to like toggle between my ebook and my Word document where I was taking my notes like so easily, like easier than having to put my book down and pick my phone up. Like it was just a lot easier. So it was easier for me to take notes, so I took a lot of notes. And I did post all of my notes on my Goodreads review. They do have major spoilers, so if you haven't read this book, don't read them. But if you have and you would like to see my slow descent into madness as I was reading this book, go check out my Goodreads review because I honestly think it's pretty funny. But to give a brief summary of this book, I read this book as the January Book Club Book of the Month for the Paperback Book Club. If you don't know, I co-host a book club. Info is always in the description box. But we read this one for January, and I read it in like 3 days, I think, because I was running out of time, and like it took forever for me to get the ebook from Libby, but I finally got it, and I read through it so fast. It was so good. Granted, it's only like 360-ish pages. It was like I didn't want to put it down. It was so good. Basically, the story follows these 2 characters, Victor and Eli, who are best friends in college, and they're both working on their thesis, and they both revolve their theses around the existence of EOs, or extraordinary people who have abilities. Eli believes that under the right circumstances, people can develop these abilities. Victor and him sort of experiment and try to develop abilities. So it takes place in like dual timelines. So there's one timeline while they're still in college, and then one that's 10 years later, right after Victor has gotten out of jail, and he's now determined to kill Eli. So there's a really interesting plot there because you're like, how do they go from best friends to wanting to kill each other? What's going on? What are EOs? How did this work? like you literally have like no idea, but honestly it is so good. It's written in like the best way possible. There's so much mystery. As soon as you get one question answered, you have another question like immediately coming after that. The characters were so well developed. Granted, I hated some of the characters, but like I hated them in a good way. Like they were so well done and they were meant to be bad characters, so I didn't like them. This book really shows how blurred the line can be between good and bad. I really liked the exploration into the different abilities that EOs can have. I really liked the characters. Like even the side characters were amazing. I was sucked in like the whole time. If you want more thoughts, you also can go watch the live show that we did. We talked extensively about characters and story and all that. And I am so pumped to read the next book because it was so good. Okay, the next book I read this month was Where the Forest Meets the Stars by Glendy Vanderhaeghe. This book is actually annotated by my friend Lexi. As you can see, there's lots of notes in here. So this book follows the story of a woman named Jo who is an ornithologist. She studies birds. And one day she's at this cabin where she's doing her bird studies, and a 9-year-old little girl wanders up and says that she's an alien. She's here on Earth to witness 5 miracles, and then she will go back to her original planet. And of course, Jo just thinks this is a little girl with a big imagination, but she doesn't know what to do. She does try to call the sheriff, but like that doesn't really work out too well. So in the story you sort of get the relationship between Ursa, the little girl, and Jo, and also Gabe, their neighbor. And honestly, the whole time I was left wondering, is this really a little girl or is she an alien? Because like I didn't know if this was like straight contemporary or if it was like sort of magical realism. So I was left guessing the whole time. Like I said, Jo studies birds, and there was a lot about her research in this book, and I thought that was really cool. It taught me a lot, especially about indigo bunting. It was really interesting to see a character with that specific research and personality, because that's not something you usually see in stories. However, there was one scene that I had a bit of an issue with. It wasn't enough to like deter me from the rest of the book. It just rubbed me the wrong way. Basically, it's this scene where Gabe, the neighbor, is at Jo's house with Ursa, and they're all eating dinner, and Gabe has a beard, and Jo is like, let's shave your beard, and he's like, no, I don't want to, and she like pins him down, and like they shave his beard. That didn't feel right to me. Like, that should be nobody's decision but his. I mean, he wasn't like super upset about it, but he didn't want it. Like, he said no, and so I don't think that she should have done that. I don't know, that part, it's really small, but it like just really didn't mesh well with me. But the rest of the story overall was super good. The climax was amazing. The resolution, like when you figure out what is actually going on and how things are all gonna work out, was so good. The only other thing that bothered me a little bit was that the last chapter was a bit of a time jump, and it was kind of abrupt, and it kind of caught me off guard. It was still really, really good. I still enjoyed it. I still gave it 5 stars. Honestly, reading an annotated version was like the best thing I could have ever done, because it was so fun to see Lexi's thoughts and comments as I was reading, and also I was like, I'm just gonna read one more chapter because I want to get to that sticky note that's right there. And this is the author's debut novel, so this is definitely an author that I'm going to be checking out her future books if and when she ever comes out with another book. Okay, unfortunately, following those 2 great books, I had to read Terrarium by Scott Russell Sanders for school. And the thing that irritates me the most about that is that we're only using this book as like a world to imagine that we're living in as we write our technical documents. And technical documents are just like instruction manuals, memos, emails, that kind of thing. And so like the assignments are always going to be, imagine you're in Terrarium, how would you do this assignment if you were living in the society in Terrarium? And what bothers me about that is that we did not need to read a whole book that nobody's ever heard of for that assignment. Like, you could have picked something like The Hunger Games. Like, if you wanted a dystopian, pick something that everybody knows. I'm pretty sure everybody's read or seen The Hunger Games. And it would have worked the same way, because we're not analyzing the story or the writing of this book. This isn't a literature class. We're just using it as a baseline for assignments. And I just hate that, because this book sucked. I hated it so much. It was written in 1985, which already isn't a good sign because I don't like classics, and while I would not consider this a classic, it was written around the same time as a lot of classics. Of course, usually classics are written a bit longer ago than that, but still, I don't really like reading anything that wasn't written in this century. I don't know, maybe that makes me a bad person. I don't know, the writing style doesn't mesh well with me. I don't relate to what's going on. I don't know. I'm sorry if that offends anybody if you like reading books that were written in 1930. I'm sorry. But so already that wasn't a good sign. But this is a dystopian novel, and honestly it's probably one of the worst dystopians I've ever read. I would say, to me, this book is a combination of The Giver and Fahrenheit 451. And if you know me, I hate Fahrenheit 451. It's my least favorite book, but not anymore because now this is my least favorite book. The Giver, I didn't love it. I didn't hate it. I just didn't really care for it. It's just not a good sign when this book makes me think of two books that I didn't really like. But also, the other thing that really irritated me is that this book has like nothing on the internet about it. There's nothing. There's like 5 Goodreads reviews. There's like 1 Wikipedia page that has an entry like this long. There's no like cliff notes or spark notes or anything. And the reason why that bothered me so much is sometimes when I'm not understanding a book, I like to go on the cliff notes and make sure I'm understanding the plot and what's going on. I couldn't do that for this. Also, I had an assignment that I had to do a couple weeks ago, and I was going to do the assignment while I was out of town with my boyfriend celebrating his birthday. And I went to do it, didn't realize I had to read this book, or at least start it, in order to do the assignment, and it was due the next day. And I didn't have the book with me, and I wasn't coming back home until the next day. So I was going to do the assignment. I couldn't do the assignment because I didn't have the book, and I couldn't cliff notes it or spark notes it because there's nothing about it on the internet. And I struggled so hard while trying to figure out what to do about that assignment. I had to read like 50 pages of it on the day it was due, and also do that. I spent like 9-10 hours doing that one assignment because I had to start this book and do the assignment. It was ridiculous. But I could have saved myself so much time if cliff notes about this book were a thing, and then I could have figured out a little bit about the plot, do my assignment, and then actually start the book. I didn't know that I had to have it started by that day because I thought I just had to have it finished by last week, and I don't know. I'm sorry, that's a really long tangent. It was just not a good experience. But going back to the book itself, the characters in the story were bland. I hated them. I didn't care about them. They were not relatable. They were just gross, honestly. The society that they live in didn't make any sense. It's a futuristic society where people on Earth now live in this thing called the Enclosure, which is just like a dome thing where there's no nature in it at all. It's all technology based, and they are away from nature because nature was like dying because people don't take care of it, you know, classic dystopian. The writing was trash. I didn't understand it. I didn't like it. It was boring. It was bland. It was hard to get through. And there were some misogynistic undertones that really rubbed me the wrong way. Basically, every woman in this society has her lady parts scooped out, except for those certain women who decide to become breeders. Yeah, they call them breeders. Those are the people who have kids. It kind of reminded me of birth mothers in The Giver, but in this book, they can become breeders when they're 13. 13. You can have children when you're 13. There's so many things wrong with that. I can't. But overall, this book was weird, annoying, poorly written, and I would have DNF'd it if I didn't have to read it for a class. I gave it 1 star. I wish I could give it 0 stars. I hate it. Absolutely worst book I've ever read. Alright, and the last book I read this month was The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins. This is the prequel to the Hunger Games trilogy, if you didn't know, and it follows President Snow, and it's sort of his villain backstory. And basically, the main premise of this story is Snow is in school, and as part of his schooling, I think, he has to be a mentor for a tribute from District 12. And honestly, the character from District 12 was cooler than the main character. Snow was so blech. My overall thoughts about this one is that the book was boring. It was boring. It was like 450 pages. It did not need to be 450 pages. It needed to be like 300 pages, maybe 350. I don't know. I was really bored the whole time, and I didn't really care what was going on. It didn't feel like I was reading a Hunger Games book. It felt like I was reading a Hunger Games knockoff, like something that tried to be the Hunger Games but wasn't. It just didn't feel like I was in Panem. It didn't feel anything like that. I will say it was interesting to experience the Hunger Games from outside of the arena because we got to see it through like Snow's eyes, and he was a mentor and not a tribute. So that was kind of interesting to see like the backside of what a mentor does for their tribute. But also it felt like the story kind of jumped around a lot. I Ow, I just bit my tongue. I didn't really know what was going on from one moment to the next. That might be because I was on audio and I just missed some stuff, but nevertheless, I didn't really get what was happening at times. And also, the romance was just boring, plain. It wasn't new. I was just bored by the romance. It didn't feel like it was needed. I just didn't really like this book, and I gave it 2 stars. So that is it for all the books I read in January. I hope you all enjoyed this video. Are you happy that I'm bringing wrap-ups back? Does that make you happy? Because it's a lot of work for me. Thank you all so much for watching. If you liked this video, please make sure you're subscribed down below so you don't miss any future wrap-ups or bookish content from me. And if you want to follow me on social media, all my links are in the description box down below as always. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!
All you see is black roses. Couldn't remember things so bad. Don't ask for something more than you